I hope that coffee and intellectual stimulation will make you feel better in due course. However, you won't get the intellectual stimulation from me. You will get the intellectual stimulation from our panel here, which is, I'm glad to say, chaired by our friend, Mr. Fantini, who is going to moderate it. I should also say that New Direction, the dynamic duo from New Direction, they have already flown off wherever they fly to. We're incredibly grateful to them. And the Stepo is also voting on your future on some peculiar piece of legislation. I have no idea what it is. In the Sabor, I hope that he will be back in order to close proceedings, but otherwise you may have to tolerate me once more. Anyway, Mario.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I'm happy to volunteer as the moderator for this panel. I think it's one of the most important, perhaps the most important panel of the whole week, because we're going to deal with one of the biggest challenges facing Europe, one that's been ignored by the political class for decades, unfortunately, but about which we've been warned for decades as well. And of course, I'm talking about the family and children and creating new generations for the future of Europe. We're in a very serious crisis, as you probably all know. My father's native country of Italy is probably one of the worst in this regard, with negative population growth. And most of the young couples I know, even though they've been dating for 20, 30 years, remain unmarried and without children. So I wonder, I don't know what's wrong with the Italian mind that leads to such a situation. Anyway, enough about that. Let me introduce our three panelists, and each one will have maximum 20 minutes to speak. Okay. First, we have Alejandro Macarrón, right here to my left, who is a strategic consultant living and working in Spain. He is Spanish. He's also a telecommunications engineer. And this technical background has led him to really look at the numbers, I think, and really do some number crunching about the demographic crisis. And he very quickly became very concerned about what he was seeing in Spain, basically the death of Spain, looking at, like I said, negative population growth, and in the process, he's become one of Europe's leading experts on this matter, looking at low birth rates. And also, this is also interesting because a lot of people leave this out, the impact of mass migration from people outside of Europe, from people from completely different cultures. So that's the double whammy facing Europe, negative population growth and then mass migration of certain people. Alejandro Macarrón has written many articles and essays in various publications, and he's the author of the book El Suicidio Demográfico de España, The Demographic Suicide of Spain, and Demographic Suicide in the West and Half the World. So thank you for joining us. I'll introduce the other two as well, and then we can proceed to Alejandro's opening comments. Ana Laco, who I met yesterday, thank you. Good to see you again, is the international coordinator of the Center for Fundamental Rights in Budapest, which is Hungary's biggest conservative think tank. And I'm very happy to say this, it resists actively the progressive woke propaganda and the woke agenda under the motto of, quote, common sense, nation, and Christianity. Anna's own areas of expertise include international relations, and she has worked as a foreign policy analyst and as an advisor in the Hungarian National Assembly. It's also, I think, worth noting that Anna was part of President Katalin Novak's original team of foreign policy experts when Novak was Minister for Families. Some of you may know that Hungary has one of the most interesting and innovative pro-family policies in the world. So perhaps Anna will draw from her experiences there and help us understand Hungary's unique family policy. And finally, Mate Gyuric. Yes, old friend, Secretary General or General Secretary, as you prefer, of the Center for the Renewal of Culture. Our host this past week, one of our hosts, businessman, entrepreneur, father of a nice big family, with a master's degree in economics from the University of Zagreb. He has a company that markets healthcare products. He's also an alumnus of the Robert Schuman Institute and the Croatian Statehood Foundation. And he'll offer us his comments and insights on the Croatian situation. Thank you all for coming. Alejandro, you have the lectern.
So thank you very much, Mario, New Direction, and all people here. I'm going to speak to my lectures. I always say that they could be very, very short, with no babies, no future, no nothing. And yes, as the other product that you mentioned, you change completely, bringing people that are from a totally different culture and with a history of clashes. Problems may be there, no? But I will try to illustrate a little bit the different dimensions of the problem, the causes and possible solutions. No? As you mentioned, I started in Spain. So the first thing is what crisis, no? What demographic crisis? I mean, the people who are ruling the European Union launched a conference for the future, an initiative for the future of Europe, and they told us main topics that were important, no? And there was no natality there was no birth, there was no famine there. It wasn't there, no. I mean, we have the highest life expectancy in the world, along with Japan, but there is health there. Yes, we can always improve health things, but we are very well. Economy, yes, we are. Maybe the Americans are more competitive. We're still very rich. So in most of the things there, we're not that bad, but we have a catastrophic problem with birth rates, and it was not there. The same with the famous Sustainable Development Goals. What sustainability is there without babies? It's not only Europe. I mean, around 2/3 of the people today in the world live in countries with self-replacement level fertility, even India. Of course, there's not still a population problem in India, but there will be in Mexico, in Bolivia, everywhere almost. So how is Europe dying? I mean, here, these are several aspects. One is what we say, the population loss. Before that, we will see there is another problem that is even bigger, that is aging, social aging. But this is the balance. I mean, basic thing is like countries where companies and babies are revenue and deaths are costs, no? Expenses. No? The balance between births and deaths is like between revenue and cost. I mean, doing an example, no? We would be saying we are losing. No? We are losing every year. A company can lose 1 year money, 2 years, but if they lose every year, no? Eventually it becomes bankrupt. So this is the balancing of the European Union. In blue is the total balance, including babies of immigrants. And in yellow is without babies of immigrants in thousands. As you see, this is a growing balance. Yes, the pandemic year, it grows faster, but the trend is very clear. No? We are losing very soon millions of people every year. Italy, yes, part of your heritage is losing maybe 200,000-300,000 every year. Spain, nearly 200,000, so ethnic or native Spaniards. No? But how does this work? No, how does population change work? No, natural population change. No, if we have 2.1 children per woman, approximately 2, for every 100 women that are today that can have children, no, that are in their 20s, 30s, whatever, within 30 years we would have the same number. No, if we have half of that, that's the case in Asturias, where I was born, the region in continental Europe with the lowest fertility. What happens is maybe in 250, there is for every 100 young people now, you have 53, no? So this is the trend for European Union, Croatia, since we are here, no? Spain and Asturias, no? As examples, no? This is how young people ranks shrink with time approximately. This is without immigration or immigration, anything. If nothing changes, just the people there. This is what happens with young people, no? And then the rest of the people, 30 years later, would be the people that are in the 60s or whatever, no? This is how it works. And this cannot be changed. I mean, with all things, this is pure projection mathematics. You see, in Asturias, where I was born, we would lose 83% of young people from now until the end of this century. I was born in 1960. The population was roughly the same, but there were 4 more children, 4 more babies, 4 times more babies that time, and 5 times without counting immigrant babies. So
we had a lot of future then. Now we have a lot of past. No? Projection is not a prediction. Projection is what will happen if given certain assumptions. If I'm driving through from here to Belgrade, I mean, I will arrive at Belgrade unless I change the route or whatever, no, or I stop, no. And this is the projections made by Eurostat. Projections, typically you have to look at serious projections are in several scenarios, no, because it's not, things may change, no, typically they make a baseline scenario, and in population I like to see the no migration scenario, no? What happens if there is no migration, no? And there you see the baseline scenario is the one in blue. I mean, the European Union would lose maybe 30 million people from now until the end of the century, but without migration, it would lose more than 100 million. So the difference, if the baseline scenario is what really happens, the difference will be immigrants and their children. And there is even other scenarios with higher migration. No? It depends. No? But what is clear is that native current populations as such are set to decline heavily if things don't change. No? In Spain, we would lose more than 50% of our native population from now until the end of this century, no? If nothing changes. No? Aging, I told you, this is not only about number of people. It's about the composition, the population pyramid. What is the age structure? No? And this is even more important in the short and mid term because societies become very, very aged. No? This is what has happened in several European countries, starting by Croatia, the euro area, etc. That's the median age. Median of something is typically or divided into equal halves, now population, for income or whatever. No, so we were countries. Every country was maybe around half of the population was 30 years old or less in 40 years ago. Now it has aged. We have aged tremendously in a very short period of time. And we will continue aging, and that changes completely society. Society becomes much less dynamic. Of course, it has problems with pensions, with many things, no? Because we have a lot of people that we have to sustain that will not be, unlike children, who we have to maintain, to sustain, will be productive in the future. Old people, we owe them gratitude, that we owe them a good life. But if there are too many, we have a problem, Houston. No? We have a problem what to do. No? For the family, I mean, this is a very text. You can read it because I will distribute it. Classic family is now a minority. No? Typically, in the past, more than 90% of the people married for their lifetime. No? This is all people, people who are dying now in Europe, 80, 90, whatever years old, more than 90% die either being married or being widow or being divorced. So it means that they have married at least once. Now around 50% of the people never marry anymore as an average. In Spain, even more than 50%. No? Of those who marry, maybe around half divorce eventually. No? Either the first years after marriage or maybe later. Later is better than the first years, because the first years maybe you will not have kids or you will only have one, and they will suffer tremendously from divorce. No? So of every parameter that you can look at, it has nothing to do with traditional family as big numbers. Of course, there are still traditional families, there are still large families, there are still stable families. Mate has 6 children, no? And, but this is really a very, very small minority, no? With what are the consequences of that? Fewer children, lots of children suffering from the divorce. This is something that everybody is worried about, poverty, things like that, material poverty. But what about affective poverty? What about the traumatic thing that is for so many children, the separation, the divorce of their parents? You know, if people divorce when they're 70 years old, okay, maybe it's not ideal, but there is no harm, or not so much harm, no? So what are the negative effects? What are the effects of this? I have to warn that this has never happened, so we can not be sure of what are the effects, but we can see what's happening in Japan. We can see what's happening in villages that are getting abandoned in Italy, Spain, everywhere. No, there were only a few old people remain. No? We can see what may happen, no? And we can expect, of course, the disappearance of populations, of cultures. Macarrón, my great-grandfather was from a village in Castile that was maybe had 500 people 1 century ago, and now it has nobody. No, this was a small culture that had been there maybe for centuries, because mostly people were from the same area for centuries, and this has disappeared. This is a very small thing, but this is, as a larger scale, is cities, is countries, is regions. No? Of course, for the economy, we cannot expect anything good, no, because it's the main asset, the main capital of a human society is people. No, if you have fewer people and people who are there are much older, no, you cannot expect anything, and you can analyze through many angles, but you cannot expect in overall anything good. But even worse is what happens for family affective life, no? Because the economy, I don't think we're going to suffer hunger anymore, because productivity is so extremely high with machines, with robots, with artificial intelligence, etc., that maybe we will not be as wealthy as we could have been with a better demography. But few people will really suffer hunger. But affective poverty, no? Loneliness. More and more people live alone, don't have children, don't have siblings, don't have relatives and uncles, aunts. No, for instance, in China, you only have one child. No, there are no uncles or aunts anymore. There is no, let's say, lateral relatives. No, that are also an important part of the big family. No, of course, there is a pressure for when you're old. This is especially bad. Loneliness is especially bad when you're old, and also when you are a child. No, if you're a single child. No. That's very hard, and it's bad for your education as well. Brothers, sisters also help us educate, no? In politics, what's happening? I mean, we're becoming gerontocracies. I mean, democracies are becoming increasingly dominated by old people, but it's not by the few old wise people like in the past, no? In Greece or in Rome or whatever, no? It's the mass of retired people who vote, and of course, they need that the rest of society transfer them, increasing parts of the wealth created. And this, when it's properly balanced, is okay. When it's too much bias for the old, then the economy has a problem. It can crash the economy, it can crash young people and crash the economy. You know? And in geopolitics, I mean, Europe is we are becoming irrelevant in the world. No? Fortunately, the rest of the world is finally developing, finally it's emerging. But that means that, again, the number of people matters. I mean, in the past, we were a minority in the world, but our productivity was so much higher that we compensated the number of people with the higher productivity per person. What happens when China has just half the productivity per person of the United States? It will have double the GDP. So it's very clear who are the winners in a world where all productivity in countries tends to converge, no? There are some few positive side effects that don't compensate. For instance, governments will save probably money in education. There will not be unemployment unless there is too much migration again. But unemployment, if there are more people who retired and people who enter the workforce every year, unemployment would tend to disappear structurally. There would be less crime. I mean, violent crime is a matter of young people. When there was we had in Spain in 2017 the big problem with Catalonia. No, I had written before that I didn't think it was something very so violent would happen, and it didn't happen. In the past, these kind of events would have driven to hundreds of people dead or even thousands. But it was like very, very old societies don't fight as much, and this is a very good thing unless you have a dictatorship, because if you have a dictatorship in your country, I mean, fighting a dictatorship is better that there are many young people who dare, no? Young people may be a little bit crazy, and that's why they dare to try to overthrow this tyrannic government. But if we are all old, no, and there is a tyrannic government, will we do anything against this government? No? So of the two sides of the coin, of course, negative effects are much bigger, no? Solitude, no, loneliness, no. This is the theoretical thing, no. What happens if everybody has one child and just one child? I mean, there is no brothers, no sisters. You only have one child and one grandchild, no. In the past, when people maybe had five, if you have 5 children, each of your children has 4 siblings, no. Then there will be like 40 cousins. They would have 40 cousins. I have myself. My kids have 66 cousins. I have 22. No, in many families. No, if you compare how many people were in the former generation, 2 generations ago, and now it's incredible. No, people who had maybe 100 grandchildren, and now they have their children have maybe 2 or 3 as maximum. No? In Spain, around 40% of people will not have a single grandchild, or 50%. A single grandchild, given the current patterns, and in Italy, I guess it's the same. No? The worst thing is the pressure to kill and to get rid of old people. No, there is ideology pushing for euthanasia, but there is an economic rationale. No, old people are costly, and so that helps. That helps ideology against life because they cost a lot. Alzheimer people with dementia are more and more and more because we don't die of other things. More women than men, by the way, because you live longer, but the curse is that you may live, it's more likely that you get them, and they're very costly to maintain, no? What do we do, no? Democracy, this is an example of what is the percentage in Spain, and in other countries is the same, no? How many people are aged 60 or more, no? It's true that 60 is not anymore, an old person is not 60 years old, is not typically old, but still you are not so young anymore, no? So more and more, democracy is going to be dominated by the old. And this is not good. I mean, it's good that there is a balance between generations, that there is a good number of young people, middle age, old, very old, etc. No? But if there is, if it's the very old who dominate, no? Nothing, cannot be a dynamic society. No? And Europe, as I said, we say now, what is the weight of Europe in the world? No? Historic demography, I always, when I see this graph, I said I should change it because decimals in the left part don't mean anything because they are not exact records, no? But approximately Europe was like 20% of the world population until 19th century that we developed much faster and population grew. So we peaked up at around 25% of world population. No? We are now less than 10% and going down, no? Going down more and more. If you look, compare us with Africa, no? Africa was, in 1950, was less than half the population of Europe. Africa is in blue, Europe is in red. And the first part of this graph, 2/3 are actual population, no? Africa is now around 2 times the population of Europe. And it is projected to be much, much more, no? The first part of the projection is almost sure. This is going to happen until 2050. Deviations will be very small. Then whatever can happen. But as you can see, the difference is appalling. No? And of course, that will create increased pressure of migration, and whatever happened with that. No? What can we do? Let's go talk a little bit about the solutions, causes and solutions. No. There are some causes for this to have happened that we cannot change and shouldn't change. I mean, the first thing is the infant mortality is much lower now. All species tend to adjust their fertility to mortality. No, fish, that's why fish have so many eggs. No, because typically most die. Maybe bears have only 1 or 2 cubs. No. And so this is something important, not to adjust mortality, infant mortality to fertility. So nobody is going to say, okay, let's go back to old infant mortality. That was more than 50% of kids did not reach adulthood in the past, no? And in Spain, more than 50%, and in many other countries, died before being 12, 150 years ago. And now almost none, no? People lived in the past of agriculture, and kids were perceived very severely as manpower, no? And we don't live on agriculture and farms. Nobody, and in this kind of farms, even farms today have many machines, no? Pension systems, no? Kids were supposed to be what will provide you your care when you were old, no? Now we have a state tells us, I give you pensions, I give you health care. The funny thing is that the state will not be able to keep its promise because we don't have kids, no? Of course, the massive entry of women in the labor force, no? And this is okay. We cannot change that, and this is good. But we shouldn't mistreat a minority of women who want to be all classic moms at home. At least in my country, in Spain, they're despised, and they're even discriminated in some tax breaks for having kids, no? In Hungary, I think it's doing very okay with that. I mean, you were a woman, you want to be mom at home, okay. You want to work and make compatible having kids with working, perfect, no? And ultimately, I think the amazing material wealth that we have, no? Benjamin Franklin predicted in the mid-18th century that all wealthier people have fewer kids. He had observed that wealthier people have fewer kids. He said that will happen here. They had that time around 8 kids per woman in America. They were very religious people. And his family here, he had 16 siblings, and he only had 2 kids after becoming very rich. So he did himself what he said, no? But what things where we can really have an impact, no? We can have an impact in the intellectual elite. The elite is more guilty than anybody. It's not the only guilty, it's not the only responsible, but all the elites were pro-births, were pro-natality, because they knew that that was the main wealth of the country. And now it's not the case anymore. There is a lack of awareness of this problem. I mean, when Europeans or Spaniards are asked what is the main problem of Spain, Europe, nobody says that this is a problem. There is a lack of pro-family and pro-natality values in education of current European kids. In the past, religion, we were all, many more people were truly Christians, and it was embedded there, the need of a family, not anymore. We try too old to have our kids. That's very important, to try to have it earlier, and this is maybe the most dramatic thing, no? Kids that people want to have, but they're too old to have them, no? Collapse in marriage rates. I mean, Hungary has done, this is one of the sub-aspects that is very important, no? To try to have more people married at more stable families, because this has a very important effect. The father's role, I mean, it's totally despised. I mean, father itself, I mean, mother has not the prestige of in the past, but father, man has the role, and the prestige has disappeared in most countries. Abortion. I mean, abortion can be a minority done by very few people, very few times, or can be maybe 20–25% of pregnancies, like in many countries now. Radical feminism. I mean, I'm a basic feminist. I'm a feminist 1.0, no? I mean, I completely agree with equality, but the rest of the second wave and third wave feminists are against natality, are against family, are against men. And the last one, the last version, gender ideology, is even against biology, against the notion of man and women and being something completely stable and permanent. No? There is too much, at least in countries like me. Everybody says, "Oh, it's very difficult to have children. Things are okay." I mean, there is an overemphasis of pessimism, I think, all over Europe. I mean, if we compare with real difficulties in other countries, in third world countries, we are still living in a kind of a paradise in Europe, but we are all the time talking about super problems that in other countries they overcome and have children anyway. No? In Spain, we had a terrible civil war 80–90 years ago, and we had many more kids at that time, with 20 million less people than now. No? So, and that was, we were really completely destroyed. No? Governments now take a lot of share of the wealth from families, away from families. When families have children, I mean, the governments have spent maybe 10–15% of GDP. Now they all spend between 40 and 50. We, of course, transfer high cost of maternity to companies, and this is bad ultimately for everybody. Anti-Christian elites. I mean, religion is a matter of individuals, of course, but elite can be pro-Christian as in the past, or anti-Christian as in the present. I mean, in between, I don't ask for pro-Christian, I just ask for neutrality. In countries like me, our elites are essentially anti-Christian. And this is bad because, for birth rates, because very religious people have more children. So, there are things that should help us more children, but, I mean, there are things like maternal mortality that in the past was tremendous, and now it's close to zero, that should help us have more children. And still, we have fewer than in the past, no? So the problem is really, really deep, because in the past it was really dangerous to have a child, I mean, for women. Around, in every 100 pregnancies, about 1 in 100 pregnancies ended with women died, either during pregnancy or within delivery or after delivery. And now it's around zero, no? So let's talk a little bit in the few minutes I have left about immigration. Immigration as a solution. No? Many people, even the EU, says, okay, no problem. I mean, you have not children, but then we have lots of people who would like to come to Europe. What are the good and the bad things about that? No? The immigration can provide low-skilled manpower. This is true. I mean, there's a lot of people, and we need. There are not only high-skilled jobs, but there are many jobs that have to be done. That it's okay. We can provide with people from poorer countries. In Europe, we don't have enough people, or anymore. We would like to do some kind of jobs, so it's a win-win. The problem is that it cannot provide high-skilled manpower. That is even more important in modern economies. Are the jobs with high productivity and produce high tax revenue for states, etc. And this is in the economic side, but in the affective side, they cannot cover. I mean, I cannot import an immigrant to be my child when I'm old. I'm alone. No? Okay, I am going to import an immigrant to be the brother of my only child. No, I mean, there are very few international adoptions, so they cannot solve that. It's not a problem for countries, for civilizations. It's a problem for you. I mean, I started talking about the problem with pension thing. Now, more and more, I say that the problem and the solution for you is having children. The problem is that you don't have you personally, you young person, the solution is that you have them. No? And then, there is, risks, high risks, no? There may be a risk of too much immigration. That happens in my country with our welfare state. We attract, Milton Friedman said that welfare state and immigration were not compatible, because it created an extra incentive that had never existed to immigrate. No? In the past, you took a risk going to another place, and you needed to survive through work. Now it's not necessary. Someone who comes to Europe knows that, if she finds a job, that's okay. If not, can live better off than in her native country. So the attractive for immigrating and for remaining, if you're employed in Europe, is irresistible. No? So that's a problem for the economy, no? And of course, there is a potential problem with integration. We have seen it in France. I mean, 12,000 vehicles were burnt in the past few weeks, no? And this is a real problem. It's because it's not easy. I mean, human beings have clashed many times, different cultures. I'm not sure if we will be able to overcome this in this century, but in the past, if you look back at history and we look back 2-3 weeks ago, the answer would be no. I mean, it's very risky, no? And there is also, immigration is also another problem, is that it creates the false impression that we don't need to have kids, no? Even if there is immigration, you still need kids for not aging your country and for yourself. And then finally, it's not, we talk about solidarity all the time now and being human, whatever. I mean, uprooting, people out from their natural families or natural environment in Senegal, in wherever, in Bolivia, whatever, not to come to, for instance, to Italy to wash dishes, no, in a restaurant. I mean, it's not, if you go for a high-skilled job in aerospace industry, maybe you change your country, no? But yes, for doing that, this is not, no, we don't want to have children. Let these people come here, no? This is not really very solidarian, no? So what happens with Muslims? I mean, there are no good data. This is the best data I have been able to compile. This is the amount of babies. Muslims are especially relevant in two key segments. One is young men. Young men are the ones that are in charge of all problems with typically, not only in terms of jihad, but everywhere of criminality, of violence. It's mostly a matter of young men, and they are especially important in that segment because it's where they immigrate. Muslim immigration is mostly of males, and then in babies that are the future. No, and this is the best I have been able to compile. No, in France, 40 years ago, they were already 10% of the babies were already the kids of Algerians or Moroccans or whatever, and that's after, there are no data how many of current French that are born in France that are having children now, but you can extrapolate with current numbers, maybe 25-30%. This is the national average, but this is not evenly distributed. That means that in certain areas, there are many more. For instance, in salt, like the salt for food, no? In Spain, in Catalonia, 70% of the babies are from foreign parents, 50% are from Africa. This is called very close to Gerona in Catalonia, a very, very beautiful area, no? So 50% of the babies are from African parents, 28% from Morocco. See, these are places where I say this is not evenly distributed. There is a joke, no, in Marseille, no? They ask you about France, no? What is the second language most spoken in Marseille? So everybody says Arabic. They say, no, French. No? So this is, of course, a joke, but it's not probably a joke in some areas of Marseille. No? So this is, again, the numbers are really important in many places. No? So what can we do? This is the last slide. It's very, very, very easy to read the slide. I mean, just a few bars. No, we should make a top priority. Boosting birth rates should be a top priority for societies. For that, it's key to have social awareness. If there is not enough social awareness of that, we have to do research about causes. I mean, every segment is different. I mean, there are people, even today, like Mate, who have 6 children. You don't come from Mars. I mean, you're in our society. And many other Croatians have 5, few have 5, few have 4, and many maybe have 1 or 2, no? But you live in the same society, but you're motivated anyway. So one size doesn't fit all, no? What you're trying to do in Hungary, to do a lot of alternatives, a lot of ways, no? But the key thing is changing cultural values. No? I mean, we will have children back when people want to have children. I mean, it seems like a tautology, tautology, but it's true. I mean, you cannot force people to have children. You cannot bribe people to have children. Only in communist Cambodia, they try to force people to have children. No? This is my time. Okay, but this is the last one. So what I said about moms at home, and also men, it's very important. Now, it seems that the only important thing is women, working women, and this is not at all the case. I mean, men count as much as women in the decision of having one child. Actually, men are 50% or more responsible of not getting married and of not having a next child in a couple. No? So if all the policies are centered in women, it's wrong. Even right-wing thinkers like Buchanan say, women don't want to have children anymore. It's not women. It's women and men. Then it means all, no? Humans, no? Immigration, of course, is critical to handle in a win-win, a realistic way. Critical. Otherwise, we will have a serious problem, and this is happening, as you see there. And we have any way to adapt. Even if we succeed tomorrow to convince everybody to have more children, societies will have to adapt anyway to a more age society. But even if tomorrow everybody is like Mate, it will take 20 to 25 years for these children to be in the active years, no? But it's not only for the state. This is very important. We always think, oh, politicians, please solve us. No, no, no. It's a matter of all of civil society, companies, private citizens. We can all help. Otherwise, we will not make it, no? Because politicians, what are the incentives for them sometimes, and many of them with the ideology, they are against children, no? So I have used more than 32 minutes. Sorry. Thank you.